And you're very welcome back to episode number 5 of the Final Whistle Ladies Gaelic Football Podcast. Once again, joined by Joanne Doonan from Fermanagh and Clare Owens from Leitrim. We're now very much, girls, into the semi-final end of the season. We've semi-finals on the cards for this weekend. Of course, the senior semi-finals confirmed at the weekend. Of course, some relegation battles to be decided. It's starting to shape up now toward the business end of the season, and definitely the senior action will be a talking point we'll get to in a few moments. It was a frantic weekend of senior action. Of course, we did have an intermediate relegation playoff as well that we will touch on later on in tonight's episode. First up, in terms of the quarterfinal action that we've seen on Saturday, was the tie between Dublin and Cork. And we spoke, I suppose, last week that this game had all the signs of being a very much a game that could be on a knife edge. God only knows what way things would go. Cork and Dublin, great history, fantastic rivalry over the years. And Dublin coming out 3-15 to 7-point winners. Like, it was a landslide performance from Dublin. They were 1-6 to 4 points ahead at the interval. Hannah Tyrrell converting from the penalty spot. And then you have the likes of Kate Sullivan, Chloe Darby, Hannah McGuinness, and Nicole Owens, along with Tyrrell, that managed to wave the white flags. And, Cork did start to come back into the game. They were just trying to get their scores. That Dublin defence, very, very hard to break down. And, then they were 8 points ahead going into the final quarter. And then from the Dublin perspective, all hell broke loose in terms of their attacking intent. They just got their scores. They just started to hit Cork a little bit more and just started to break them down. And then you see Kate Sullivan and Sinead Goldrick putting the ball in the back of the net late on to wrap up the tie. I know, Claire, we've spoken about Dublin's attacking intent and just the way that they got going. Were you surprised by the level of attacking threat that they brought to Cork on Saturday?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's kind of hard to, for us to have played them. I'd have thought Cork would have proved a stiffer challenge, but at the same time, I don't have much experience playing Dublin, but I did really feel the day that we played them that they were just, I think I said it last week, so full of intent that you thought, I don't know, who's going to stop this team this year?
Because, you look at the way that Cork performed, Cork are a very, very strong team, and the way that they can, I suppose, attack teams down. And Katie Quirk is a very, very strong player. And if you take her out of the equation, as Dublin did, Cork were searching to try and find their scores, but that Dublin defence was just very, very strong. They just proved just that step above. Dublin are really playing with a lot of intent this year. I know with the way that their title defence went last year, they were very disappointed that they couldn't go all the way and try and contest the semi-final and try and get back to Croke Park and go for another All-Ireland in succession. When you're looking at them now, Joanne, Dublin look really like a serious contender this year, don't they?
Yeah, I think that was definitely a big marker to put down at that quarterfinal stage. Us, I suppose it's so hard to call these games because you never want to call a winner, but I genuinely thought that game was going to be a lot closer, and maybe, like you said, the score probably didn't reflect how maybe closer of a game it might have felt say during it. But I think that was just a point to prove to Dublin about how ruthless they can be. And I know if you're in that scenario, you want to, I suppose you don't let up. They probably were winning the whole game, and they knew they probably had the beating of Cork maybe come into that last quarter. But that's just Dublin all over. They weren't gonna, oh yeah, we're happy enough at the win. They were ruthless. They were taking every opportunity that they got, and I think that it's probably a bit of a putting a marker down to the rest of the competition that they're here to go to the long haul. But yeah, very impressive performance by them.
8 points is a fairly big margin to have, but when you look at the final 15 minutes, you think, look, Cork can pick up the socks now and try and work their scores and try and get back into the game. And then Dublin, they're just constantly, they're adding to the tally, they're adding to it. And then you have players like Kate Sullivan and Sinead Goldrick that can pop up with back-to-back goals in a matter of seconds to see out the game. That just bodes well for their confidence factor. And just, I know we've spoken about her, Claire, before, but the Hannah Tyrrell factor, just another standout performance by herself. And you see the likes of Kate Sullivan. So even if you try and neutralise one, you're going to have the other to deal with.
Oh, yeah. And just, again, I know we've spoken about this, but what she brings to their game, other than what you might see her do on the field. Like she's just a constant presence for them. She's organising everybody and everything, and yeah, she's a really, really important part of their entire game. And as I said, then obviously her individual brilliance is sort of an aside almost. Like she's so much more than that. But yeah, just finishing really strong in their games, and then their players that come in as well. You're kind of looking. I remember that day watching them come on, going, who's coming on now? Look, we spoke about Amy Mackin coming on a field as a sub or a finisher last week, and Dublin have so many players like that you're thinking, oh, who next? Like, so if you're down against them, it's the last thing you want to see. And they also know that they're going to finish as strong, if not stronger, than they started. So, like, when you have that pick of players and that panel to choose from, you are going to be a real force to be reckoned with. But yeah, really, really kind of clinical performance by them at the weekend. And, Cork, I think, I don't recall in recent history Cork getting beaten by that big of a margin. So that'll be a big defeat and a big hit for them to take.
And I know Dublin are missing players, the likes of Lauren McGee's going to be out now for the rest of the season. Such a big miss for them. And, Carla Rowe didn't play the last day, and I thought Chloe Darby came in and did a fantastic job for her. And that just shows the level of depth that Dublin are bringing, that, as you say, like, even when they go to the bench after 45 or 50 minutes of action, they can still call upon players to come on and get them scores when they need it. And it just showed just the level of threat that they are going to bring this championship season. So they were the first team that booked their place into the All-Ireland semi-final. All eyes then turned to Tuam as to who would play Dublin. Would it be a repeat? And would Waterford get into the semi-final from that group stage? Or would it be Galway? And of course, a repeat from their game last year. And of course, Galway coming out 118 to 112 winners on the day in Tuam, and booking a successive semi-final appearance in Tuam on Saturday. I suppose we can't knock the start that they had. I mean, getting the score from Ava Noon after 45 seconds, and then you get another three, the likes of Olivia Dively, Alva Davaran, and Kate Slevin all putting the ball over the bar. Really strong start. And then it got even better as they got a penalty as Noon was fouled in the area, and Slevin converted in for a 1-4 to no score lead. Very strong start. And then you go in at half time and you're winning the game 1-7 to 3 points. Waterford, like, they had their chances. Fantastic double save from first Dervla Gower and Brona Quinton. Like, I think it was Chloe Fennell and Anya O'Neill that had chances. Waterford, they had their chances, but just couldn't get over the line into getting those scores. And while they did come back, Galway still looked very strong after the break. They were 1-9 to 5 clear in the 34th minute, and then suddenly it was 112 to 6 points. They were just constantly adding their scores, and Laura McGregor was doing her level best, got a fantastic goal to try and pull things back, but Galway just, I suppose, showing their quality and their class in the latter stages just to see the game out. And Waterford, to their credit, like, they never backed down. They were constantly just trying to knock the scores over, but just not working their way out. And now we are looking at a Galway semi-final date with Dublin. I know, Claire, you've played both of these teams. You played Galway in the Connacht Championship. You played Waterford in the group stage. Galway really showing their hunger this year after last year's disappointment.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I did probably think this game would be a little bit closer. Like you said, Waterford never gave up, and they were constantly threatening, let's say. But as you said, Galway just, I suppose, they're another team that, as I've said about Dublin, but they just seem very kind of focused on the job at hand, and are very going about their business kind of in a very clinical manner. And Waterford looked, a lot more, I suppose, ordinary than the day we played them. And Galway look like they're hoping to make it back to Croke Park, and they're looking good to do so.
Like, you look at Kate Slevin scoring a goal and 6 points. Absolutely fantastic individual display from herself. Olivia Dively gets 5 points, and then you're adding further scores from other areas of the field as well. Like, Galway, they can, they've fantastic defenders that, when given license to roam forward, can give you scores or can just get the attacking threat going. And then you've the likes of Roisin Leonard there. Like, I mean, Roisin comes off the bench and gives you 2 points. Fantastic servant for Galway ladies football over the years. And I suppose you talk about super subs and you look at, like, who's starting for Galway, and then it's like, oh yeah, look, we're in the final 10 minutes. You have a player like Roisin that you can spring off the bench and she's going to give you a bit more magic in front of the post.
Yeah, like I think, sorry, John. Looking at the Galway panel, you're maybe a little bit surprised by, let's say, the starting team, but I suppose if you're looking at over the course of 60 minutes, having your best 20 on the field, they are maybe they're managing that really well. Like, as I say, when I saw the starting line, I was surprised with a couple of omissions, but there could be anything going on in the background there that we don't know about. The point is, like you said, they have their best players available to them on the field at some point for the game, and that's really all that matters.
Yeah, I was going to agree with that, in that it nearly could be a tactical thing, whereas like the ability, obviously you want to start your best team, but when you probably have three or four maybe variations of your best team because of the selection of players you have, like imagine, again, Claire, we'd be talking about this, like you're up against it in a game and you see Roisin Leonard come on and you're just like, oh Jesus, like, it is fantastic to have that depth, and I think Galway are very dangerous going forward, and like Gemma said there, that it is that kind of like the range of scores they have and how confident they play. Like they just look like they're like a real flair on them this year. Like they're just really, really skillful and they just look connected, and it is really interesting to see. But yeah, I definitely think that they're even, I suppose, the ability to play a wee bit more free flowing when you get that lead up at the start. It definitely, like, in any of them, like quarterfinals, semi-finals, any, I suppose, game that's a final after it, you're constantly thinking that those psychological edges can be massive. So for them, for Waterford, they always feel like they're on the back foot and things just not going their way. It can just be such a momentum, like an energy zapper. Whereas like when Galway have that wee bit of a cushion with the score, they're a lot more free-flowing, a lot more risk-taking, a lot more attacking, that they can probably play that better football, and it does kind of add to that.
I suppose,
exactly.
When you look at a team, like, as you said there, Joanne, like, if you can bring on a player like Roisin Leonard, like, for any defender, if you're after being run ragged for 50 minutes trying to defend one forward, and then you see her coming on, like, the final 10 minutes, you're just like, you just know you're going to be in for a really, really tough time of it. I can imagine, Claire, like, when you see one star forward and you have another one, I say you're just going, we'll wait for that final whistle now to sound.
Oh yeah, and then you're just so impressed by someone like Roisin Leonard as well, who casually take a free off the ground and pop it over. Like, you can't help but applaud that. So you're in admiration of all these players too, as well as being their opposition on the day.
But like, whether it was tactical or maybe there was a couple of injuries that saw Galway have a couple of notable omissions from the last day, I think it bodes well to their confidence that even with those players missing, that they could still produce a strong performance. But I'd imagine, obviously, we will look more in depth to it next week in terms of the semi-finals. But taking on a team like Dublin, you probably will need your full deck at your disposal to take on a powerhouse like that.
Yeah, but I suppose then when you, like Joanne said, the kind of tactical side of it, maybe when the team, what you might consider their strongest 15 start, you kind of know what you're dealing with. If you're waiting to see when this player might come on or might not, and how might that might upset your rhythm, it could be tactical and it could prove very clever. So, I think for the management, the best way to have a panel of players is that nobody really knows who's going to start the game next week, or am I going to be that finisher? So they're probably in a really good place in that sense in terms of training and being competitive with training, as I'm sure they always are. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, and do you start, like you say, against Dublin with your strongest 15 or what you might consider it, or do you spring someone off the bench when Dublin could do without, an impact? So, but the same goes for Galway in that sense with Dublin. So, that's going to be a cracker.
Like, it's not going to be the 15 that starts that's going to win you a game. It's going to be your full panel and making use of those subs. And like, you look at Dublin, obviously Carla Rowe wasn't there the last day. If she starts or if she's a sub, you bring someone like her on. Galway can bring someone like Roisin Leonard on. Like, it could just come down to the whole tactical side of the game and just what way your teams will go. In terms of one player that had a standout contribution in the quarterfinals. Now, there was plenty of them at the weekend, but hat-trick hero, Siofra O'Shea for Kerry against Kildare down in Tralee. Kerry winning 3-12 to 11 points, booking their place back in a semi-final in Tullamore this year. The defending champions, 3 goals and 2 points from O'Shea. Just on her, before we talk about the game, like, I think she's back playing some of her best football. I know the last couple of years have been hit with not one but 2 ACL injuries, and last year at the start of the year she was going around the league games with the clipboard and helping out the management team and trying to do stuff in the background, and then worked her way back in and was really coming into her own as we got closer towards the All-Ireland final. But I think this year, from the league into championship, she's just shown just what she's well capable of doing.
Yeah, like, I think I've such admiration for anyone, never mind an ACL injury, any injury, I think, but to overcome 2 and to, like you said, be in that position where you're watching. And I just think she's got back to a point where she looks like she's really enjoying her football. Like, and I think maybe them lessons, or maybe them, I suppose, injuries give you that sense of, this is why I do it and I really want to enjoy it, as opposed to feeling like you have to do it. And sometimes county can get like that when you're committing so much, but she just looks unstoppable at the minute. Like, no matter who Kildare put on her or tried to stop her, like, I feel like she's such a smart reader of play, and her ability to get separation and to lose a player is unreal to watch. Like, and yeah, like I said, she's just a phenomenal player. Like, but I think you just have to have such admiration, and she's such an inspiration for anyone that is injured, to kind of prove what you can do if you keep your head down, and on that there's always ways you can stay involved and to constantly learn, and there's always something that you can be working towards. So like, no doubt she's who she is because of her attitude towards that too.
Because what I've liked about her, like, you know, by the age of 22, she had spent, I suppose, not 1 but 2 times on an operating table getting the ACL done, the recovery up and down to Santry and all that, and was trying to come back. And I remember, like, you obviously hear about those players that are coming through your own county, and, you know, like, just what's coming through the production line. I remember just hearing about this girl from South Kerry that was performing really well. I said, look, we'll see what way she develops. Like, people were talking about her, like, in the same sense that they were talking about David Clifford when he was coming through minor level down here, that this is going to be a player that you're going to want to watch. And I remember that 21 year, like, said, okay, let's see what she's well capable of. And I had seen her playing very well in Tralee against Clare in the league, and then got to Killarney and did the ACL that year. And then 2023, she was captain, was doing fantastic stuff, got all the way. That absolutely dour game in Tralee against Meath, an absolute whitewash of a game, played her heart out that day, fantastic. And then you hear just before the semi-final that she done it for the second time when she was going to get the chance to captain her team. Eventually they did make it to Croke Park, and she did do her best to lead the team out and to try and get over that line. It was utter heartbreak for a player. I'm sure, like, the two of you have gone through your own times of being out injured and on the sideline. I can imagine, like, it's definitely a low point when you have to, I suppose, go through the recovery, not once but twice for the same injury and stuff like that. But no, she's certainly put her best foot forward in terms of her scoring ability this year, and really leading on Kerry. Because when you look at that game, like, Kildare got off to a flying start. I think there was a few surprised faces in Austin Stack Park on Saturday evening by just how they performed. Like, Alana Priesman with 2 fantastic frees, and, you know, Aoife Rattigan and Gillian Wheeler, they're all getting their scores. You know, Kildare are 4 points up in a matter of minutes. Kerry slow to get out the blocks. I know we've spoken about it in the past that Kerry it can take them a while. Maybe it's the second half, but when they do get going, you know, they eventually, you know, get the way where they want to go. And you see Siofra gets the goal in the opening 10 minutes. And, you know, I have to say, I know we had her on recently enough, Emma Costello, fantastic, had a part to play in the goal. You know, it was herself, Niamh Carmody, caught Lynch, and Emma Costello, normally as a centre-back, she decided to run up the field now today and have a bit of fun, and she has a shot fantastically saved, and then O'Shea manages to get in there and tap home the rebound, and then you have Danielle O'Leary and Rachel Dwyer, and suddenly Kerry start to come back into the game. in 22 minutes, it's 1-3 to 6 points. You're thinking, okay, what's going to happen here? And then Kerry get the penalty. Schaefer puts it in the back of the net, and they're 2-5 to 7 points up at half time. I suppose having started a little bit sluggish and coming out of the traps a little bit late, for any team when you go in at the break with that lead, certainly it's a bit of a confidence factor.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think we've spoken about the kind of slow start maybe a little bit from Kerry this year, but they're so maybe confident in what they are capable of doing that they see it as we have 60 minutes to do this. And I don't mean that's not a cocky thing, but self-assured, and they know, I suppose, they have a lot of players that will and consistently do kind of step up to the mark. So I'm sure, they would probably rather have a faster start, but at the same time, you never get the sense from them that there's that the slow start is causing an urgency about their play. And as I say, probably down to the fact that they have so many leaders all over the field and so many girls that will kind of get the ball rolling, so to speak, on their scores. And yeah, you saw kind of that at the weekend as well. But like you said, not to it sounds patronising against Kildare, I genuinely was really impressed with their entire game down there. Like, they were away from home, they were in the senior quarter-final, and they were worth every bit of it. So I think Kildare performed really, really well on the day. Obviously, Kerry won it out, but I think it was a really good performance from Kildare.
And it easily could have been a game of narrow margins. Like, after the restart, like, Kildare, look, you're going in, you're away from home against the champions, you're down by a couple of points. You want that instant impact in the second half. And, they came very, very close to waving the green flag of their own. Fantastic. It was a save off the line by Caught Lynch that denied Prisman the chance to put the ball into the back of the net. And then you're thinking, okay, look, Kildare can get the momentum, and Kerry then go down the other end, and it's O'Shea getting her hat-trick. And I suppose probably a bit deflating from the Kildare perspective. When they had their chances, they did very, very well. They only scored 4 points in the second half. I know the elements playing their own factor in proceedings on Saturday evening, but Kerry just started to stamp their authority. We spoke about the second half performance against Cork. Wasn't as devastating on the scoreboard, but they got a 10-point margin at the end. They were working away, they were doing the right things. And I will say, and as you said it there, Claire, like, I have to give huge credit to Kildare this year. Like, I know they made it to the quarterfinals and they bow out after the weekend, but for the level of the changes that were made to go from surviving a relegation playoff 12 months ago to going down in the quarterfinal stage and giving Kerry a really good run of it. Like, had that goal have gone in, we could have been talking about a different margin, maybe even a different outcome if momentum had gone the way of Kildare and Kerry hadn't gotten the rub of the green in those last few exchanges. But from their perspective, like, obviously you've seen it now, Claire, where you've gone up to senior, and Kildare have had the chance now to settle. They saved themselves last year. Now they have a chance to go again in 26, and they are doing very well underage level in terms of their minors and so on and so forth. And no doubt, like, we could be seeing the start of a potential really good run for Kildare.
Oh, for sure. And that's what I mean. I genuinely mean that when I was really impressed by them this weekend, because they are, I suppose, inspiration to anyone coming up from, like, it is a big step up from intermediate to senior, the same in any step up in a grade, but it is a massive learning curve. But they've kind of shown that they took the initial, I suppose, hit of we're back in senior championship, and they've now started to kind of make their own little spot in that senior championship. So yeah, as I say, I think they're inspirational to anyone coming up to the senior grade to say, yeah, you can fight relegation one year and then end up in a quarter final the next. So no, huge credit to Kildare. Like you said, their underage structures are brilliant, and their underage development is clearly going really well. So they've always been a really, really strong county with ladies football, and really good to see for football in the country that Kildare are mixing it with the other senior teams.
So that was obviously the last game that took place on Saturday in terms of the quarterfinal action. there's one final game that went ahead on Sunday that would obviously see whoever would meet Kerry in Tullamore in the other of our quarter-final ties. Meath against Tipperary looked like it was going to be a very close game, but then Meath just turned the magic on and showing shades of the last few years where they were emphatic, lifting back-to-back senior All-Ireland titles and just producing the magic stuff again. And it's Vicky Wall and Niamh Galogly, just two of their standout performers that fired them to 217 to 1-6 win over Tip. Emphatic performance from Meath, and I can imagine, like, I know, Claire, you played them years ago, but when you look at the way they're performing now, like, while I suppose the last two championships, of course they would be playing Kerry again, that they lost in the quarterfinals to Kerry down in Tralee, they've shown that they're back amongst probably the best that we've seen from those, I suppose, the years prior.
Yeah, I think they were really impressive the weekend, and they're going about their business very quietly. There's not all that much chat about them, I don't think, really, but they'll be happy enough with that. And yeah, definitely saw shades kind of the year they won, and just, I don't know, I can't put my finger on exactly what, but that felt like a kind of a statement performance from them at the weekend. I was really impressed by them.
Like, they just, I suppose they went about their business, and you're leading 2-9 to 2 points at half time. Like, you have a fairly strong cushion, but I imagine you don't want to be too complacent either. Like, I know you have, Niamh Galogly gets 1-2 in the game, Vicky Wall gets 1-2, Marion Farley's coming up with a couple of points. We mentioned the Emma Duggan factor as well. They're getting scores from nearly all over the pitch. Like, they were just magnificent to watch, just bringing that scoring threat. But Tipperary could obviously have roared right back into the second half. So I can imagine, and I know both of you have had games where, you might have a really strong first half and then all of a sudden a team just gets a really, really good purple patch and comes right back into it. So when you do have a lead like Meath did at half time, it's double digits. What's the thought process in the dressing room in terms of, look, it's not one and done just yet?
Well, I know we always are kind of the belief, you kind of go out with a win like that or with a lead like that, kind of thinking it's 0-0 at half time again. But again, look, it goes back, or it goes without saying, there's obviously going to be that, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to be playing with a wee bit more free flowing because you have that kind of cushion. You're not going to be overthinking every mistake like you would maybe if you're a point up or a point down, So there maybe took it a wee bit for granted to allow Tip to kind of have that purple patch, or likewise maybe Tip just kind of felt it hadn't got into the game the first half and maybe the score didn't reflect kind of how they thought they were going to perform. But like you said, Meath was always going to be very difficult. Like you said, there's not like one or two players that you could definitely hone in on or double up on, or really, they have such an array of players that are well capable of taking a score. And I think that's probably the hardest thing, playing those kind of teams, that, you have to have a range of defenders and a system to try and stop the threat. Which again, maybe Tip probably played more into the second half, but I'd say Meath are probably happy with how they performed and getting such a good lead at the start, but I'm sure they'll be looking at that second half performance kind of thinking we can't let that happen in the semis.
Because I know you have, Galogly and Wall both getting goals in the opening half, but as you said there, they were 2-14 to 4 points up going into the final quarter, and it finishes 2-17 to 1-6. So, they did allow Tipperary to get a couple of scores, maybe just, 15 minutes, just not enough for Tip to really turn the tide in the game. But if they come up against, they'll come up against Kerry now in Tullamore in that semi-final. If they have, we know the way Kerry like to finish games on a high and are well known for it this year, that they do seem to come alive in the second half. If Meath maybe slow down in that final quarter, that it really could come back to haunt them. And I know they're back in a semi-final for the first time since 2022, but they mightn't end up going back to Croke Park to bring Brendan Martin if that does materialise again.
Yeah, and look, you
Yeah,
could
I
probably
suppose
look
against.
at it. Sorry.
You go, Joanne, sorry.
That it was kind of like, I suppose Tipperary, sorry, Meath could be looking at Kerry, like if they get a good run up at the very start and try and maintain that lead, you know, you could look at it both ways, I suppose. But it is, well, I know personally, I don't know why sometimes I think it's easier when you are behind than trying to maintain a lead. Sometimes it's actually harder when you're ahead, when you know a team is gunning for you, like, you know. But I actually think that's going to be a very, very interesting semi-final. Obviously, I think Kerry are going to be very hard beat this year, but it will be very, very interesting. Two teams that I know we've both talked about this, just going about their business very quietly, that it will be very interesting to see how they fare out against each other.
Yeah, you were saying you were actually going to come in there with a question, I think, Claire, just on that.
I can't quite think now, actually, but no, just I suppose, like you said, Diarmuid, and Joanne, you alluded to it as well, the maybe against a different team, a Galway, a Dublin, a Kerry, you won't be able to take foot off the gas, you know. So for Meath, but Meath will be very aware of that at the same time, and you know, Tipperary were always going to get some chance in the game to get a bit of a foothold. So, you know, I suppose it's probably hard to compare game on game. You play the teams that are in front of you, but yeah, Meath just might be one to be watched, I think.
Like they battled right until the very end. I suppose they really, really wanted to try and get over that line and book their place in the semi-finals. But like Meath, and that's not to say that they will have something similar happen against Kerry. Like I imagine, you know, you're going to go back to the drawing board. You're going to know where Kerry are going to be strong going into that game. Look, they've, as I said, they played them in 23 in the quarterfinals. They lost in Tralee. They played them in the 24 quarterfinals and lost in Tralee. Now they're playing them in the semi-finals in Tullamore this year. Don't think they're going to want to fall at this hurdle, or should I say, to fall to Kerry for the third year in a row. This time, of course, in the semi-final stage, and they are showing their class. And even look, we've spoken about the Vicky Wall factor, but she's still being a consistent player. And like Kerry are going to have to watch her. Then you're going to have Emma Duggan that you're going to have to watch, and Galogly as well. Like their scoring threat, but then like their defenders as well, like are very, very strong. And while Kerry's attacking threat has been potent, when you look at their front three, and obviously you look at Schaefer's performance on Saturday, like Meath have the defenders that could really make that game an absolute knife edge of a performance to watch for the spectators.
Yeah, and I think Meath's defence are really good attackers as well. I mean, I know that's kind of the way the game has gone, generally speaking, but you look at it like Aviv Gallagher haven't gotten such success as a wing back and in their defence, and now she's centre half forward and scoring 1-2. So that is a sign of a team. You know, if you're kind of going, Eve, it's fine, we don't need you in our defence anymore, or you're better up front, like it tells you kind of the mindset of even their defence. So they're not only happy to defend the opposition, but they want to get up the field and get in the scoreboard too. So that's a dangerous thing to deal with when they're all obviously well able to play football, but they kind of take care of business at the back, but want to get forward too. So yeah, I think you know, look, Meath are full of football, as are all the teams that are left. But yeah, it'll be an interesting semi for sure.
So that obviously set up our fantastic double header of action now in Tullamore on Saturday, the 19th of July. First up, Kerry versus Meath at 5:15. And then, of course, the meeting of Dublin and Galway at 7:30 in Tullamore. Those are going to be two absolutely fantastic games of football to determine just who will be tussling it out in Croke Park for Brendan Martin this year. Those were the senior quarterfinals. We had two more senior games, of course, on the cards at the weekend. Those were our relegation playoffs that took place. I can already see Claire's smiling away as we will reflect first, of course, on the Mayo versus Leitrim game. Of course, Mayo securing their senior status for next year. 214 to 13 points win over Leitrim in Tullamore on Saturday. And overall, watching it, looking at the game, like Leitrim started bright, got a couple of scores. Mayo were scorers for the opening 8 minutes. Then they kind of started to cause a few problems in terms of their forwards. And Lydia Hanley has goal chance, fantastic save by Michelle Guckian. And then Annie Goff opens their account, then Sinead Walsh just turns the magic on and gets them into the advantage. And, you're going in at the break 1-6 to 6 points down, Claire. I suppose, what was the thought process when it's 3 points? There's a big 30 minutes, and I know you had chances, but just didn't materialize. But what was the mood like in the camp?
Yeah, like you said, I think we were happy with the start we got, and we were. I think we were competitive throughout, but particularly in the first half, Sinead Walsh doing Sinead Walsh things, and when she does, she's. I would say she's quite unstoppable, but no, obviously that goal really just gave them. We spoke about another team there where when you have that little bit of a cushion, you are playing in a more carefree than careful manner, and to kind of let them have that cushion probably was maybe the most disappointing part of the game, because from then on they knew they had that cushion. They could be a bit more risky in terms of their forward play, and at the other end, just we really, I thought our forwards did well, but they really got very few chances of a shot at goal. I thought their defence were really, really tight this time around, and yeah, but going in at half time, it's still all to play for very much. And I think the game kind of turned a little bit on. They're getting a penalty. Our goalkeeper, Michelle Gucking, doing what she does and making a fantastic save. In your mind, or certainly for me as a player, you almost assume that a penalty, a goalie has so little chance of saving a penalty, just given the circumstances of it, that when they do, you think, oh my goodness, we weren't expecting this. Here's our chance. And it just didn't. It went up the field, came back down, and they ended up with a goal. So it was sort of a double hit. It was still only one goal, but psychologically we went from, it's probably going to be a goal. No, it isn't. Oh, it is. And that, I think, was the first time. That was probably their biggest lead. And we just never really clawed it back then. But look, full credit to Mayo. They've been a senior team for a very, very long time. And, we obviously were going to give it our very, very best shot. I feel like we did that for the most part, and we certainly learned little bits from the other games. But Mayo, as I say, they've been senior a long time, and they weren't going to let go of that grip easily.
Like, most people might see Michelle Guckian and go, wouldn't associate her with being between the posts, probably be more like to put the ball over the bar or put the ball into the net more so than save the shots. But what a fantastic performance by her in between the posts the last day. And like, you look at the start of the second half, like you had the chances, like Alba Clancy, Leah Fox and Laura O'Dowd get a couple of points, but then you're matched at the other end when Mayo are matching you nearly score for score. And Michelle saves that penalty from Annie Goff, and Murren Devaney goes up, Murren gets to score, but then, as you said, Mayo get that bit of a lead. McDonald, Erin Murray and Walsh, they start to get the scores. They have that bit of breathing space, and then of course Ava McDonald gets the goal in the final few exchanges that pretty much solidified that Mayo would be a senior team for next year. But from your own perspective, I know, look, it's going to be a do or die game now this weekend to just keep your senior status for another year at the minimum. But I'd imagine, like, literally with the game by game approach, that like while you're coming up against a Mayo team that have been senior for a few years, and we'll talk about your opponents who've been a senior team for a good few years as well, like you're back learning. Like, it was so many years since Leitrim last played at senior level, and now you've had to play Dublin, you had to play Waterford, and then you had to play the likes of Mayo. Like, you're playing the star-studded teams, but I think you could take an awful lot from the Mayo performance and just try to turn the screw now this weekend against your opponents.
Oh yeah, and I mean, relegation semi-finals are a strange kind of concept because you're going, we really want to win, but also if we lose, there's another shot. So, for both us and Donegal this weekend, at no point obviously are you approaching a relegation semi-final saying, oh well, we have another chance, but that that's there. So this weekend, we also know that whoever loses this game is going down to intermediate. So there's a hell of a lot to play for. And yeah, look, I think for the younger girls in the team particularly, like to have the chance like they'll gain so much from having played the teams that we played this year. And you could look at it kind of going, oh, well, tough luck that you got drawn against the likes of Dublin and Waterford. But, also you watch them play at the weekend and you think, as I say, just a lot to be learned from getting to play those teams. So it's been great. And certainly if we can maintain senior status, we'll reflect on the season as, a lot of tough days out, but ultimately we are still where we want to be. So that's obviously what we'll be aiming for, but I know also what Donegal will want to.
Obviously, as you said, Donegal will be now on the horizon this weekend. We'll touch on that game shortly. Just on Donegal's performance at the weekend, losing 15 points to 5 to Armagh in the other, of course, of those games. Like, Armagh started at 100 million miles an hour and were 11 points to 1 up at half time and just went about their business in the second half. Like, they were just very, very strong. They really showed just what they're capable of. I know they had the wind in their back to the opening 30 minutes, but just looked very, very strong. Like Lauren McConville, Caroline O'Hanlon looked very, very strong. And you've really kicked 5 points. Like they showed what they were well capable of doing. Like they're, look, Armagh, I think a lot of people were surprised that Armagh ended up in the relegation playoffs this year, but they can build now for 2026 10-point winners in the finish up. Looking now to what's going to happen this weekend, like Donegal are still a fantastic team, and while they just haven't gotten the results this year, we know what they're well capable of. They have those players that when they get going, like the likes of Jodie McFadden, she saw what we could do at the weekend. Like, she's got 3 points for Donegal, trying to do what they can. You look at Roisin Rogers, fantastic performer for Donegal, and will be one of those players that will look to lead by example now this weekend. From the Ulster perspective, Claire, or Joanne, should I say, the way, I suppose, it was coming into Armagh, a lot of people had tipped them, but maybe Donegal just maybe a little bit deflated with how their championship campaign has gone.
Funny, I was just going to say that I'd say Donegal themselves probably are a wee bit disappointed in how their years kind of turned out. Like, I suppose what started as a promising year, getting to the Ulster senior final, and I suppose thinking that maybe that was the start of them not maybe performing as well as they had hoped, and a few close games. But I think, like I've mentioned before, I feel like they are, like with new management, things like that, a good turnover of players. Like it's always going to take time to rebuild and to get that kind of, I suppose, culture and drive back in the girls. Like, and I think you can definitely see, like you've mentioned, like there's certain girls that are massive leaders in that team. Like, and I think they'll be definitely wanting to stay up in senior to kind of continue that for them young girls to really grasp that experience. But like Claire said, like, no one's in a relegation game hoping that they're the one that goes down. Like, so I think like it is a game for the taking for both teams. Like that, it is going to be very interesting. Like, they probably knew that it was going to be a tough one against Armagh, Donegal themselves. But then saying that, I when I seen the starting team for Armagh, I was a wee bit surprised at how many of their main girls weren't starting too. So it's, maybe Donegal just are in that wee bit more of a transition phase at the minute.
Yeah, I know Armagh, their injury worries. I know, look, you speak there about management teams. Look, Armagh are going to be looking for new management now for 2026. And, maybe they'll just have a few players that might step away. Look, time will tell. We'll have to see what Armagh will field in the opening round of the league in 26. But look, it's all going to be in terms of a Leitrim and a Donegal perspective, whether they're going to be playing senior football next year or whether they're going to be in the intermediate grade. 2:00 this Saturday in Kilcoyne Park. It's going to be a very, very tough battle between Leitrim and Donegal. From your own perspective, Claire, like, obviously, look, it's 60 minutes, it's another game, but it's also not another game at the same point, because it's 60 minutes from either going back down into intermediate or getting another crack at senior and trying to grow and trying to develop as a team.
Yeah, look, I suppose you can choose whatever side of that coin that gets the best out of you as an individual. If you want, if it's best for you to look at it as just another game, by all means do. If you're the kind of player that needs that kind of do or die motivation, then I suppose for us, we'll be hoping that we do get the best out of each individual and collectively as a team, because like any team in a relegation game, it's a long, long way back up, and there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that have to go in your favour to get back to where we were last bank holiday weekend in August. So there is a lot at stake, but I do sort of think when all is said and done and all the podcasts have been recorded, it is just 60 minutes of football. So as much as possible, nothing major is going to change in our approach, and I doubt it will for Donegal either. Like, we know what's at stake, but at the same time, the only way you can affect that result is by playing football and doing it to the best of your ability. So, it's the stakes are high, but it's still the same game of football that we know and love and want to play as best we can.
And I know it wasn't in the senior grade at the weekend, but we've seen just how nerve-wracking and anything can happen in a relegation playoff final when you look at the intermediate clash between Wicklow and Offaly. Like, consecutive years, Wicklow have been victorious in relegation playoffs, 3-11 to 3-8 after extra time. I think it was a game that just had it all. Like, it was all, coming into it, it was a Leinster derby. It was everything at stake, no doubt, like what's going to happen this weekend with the Donegal and Leitrim game. But, Wicklow had a bit of confidence coming in off the back of the Monaghan game, and we're just trying to preserve their status again. And I think as terms of starts go, I think fantastic for Offaly, not so much for Wicklow. Sarah Doyle, scoring 2 goals in 10 minutes. They're leading 2-2 to 2 points. Say that 3 times fast. And then you've, Wicklow come back. Lucy Dunn gets their green flag, but Offaly end the half stronger. They're 5 points clear at halftime, 2-6 to 1-4. 6 minutes into the second half, Doyle gets in for her hat trick. 3-6 to 1-4. You're thinking, okay, Offaly, they've really started strong. They're starting to get there. And then Wicklow, they get a couple of points. Then they hit the jugular in the 42nd minute. Lucy Dunn gets her second goal. We're back to a 3-point game. Then it gets a bit, cagey in that final quarter. Both teams exchange a point. And then as the clock is very much in the red, and you just think, look, Offaly have done everything. They've done so much to try and preserve their status. Dunn floats in a free, and I think it's the arm of Sinead McGettigan that gets the flick to the back of the net, and it's 3-7 to 3-7 at the end of normal time. It goes to extra time, and for the first time in the game, Wicklow managed to take the lead. They lead by 2 points at half time in the first period of extra time, and Offaly, they battle away, and it just doesn't go their way in the end, Wicklow having enough to seal it out. And the scenes at the end, like, Wicklow were so delighted when they got over the line against Monaghan. I think it was such a relief for them that they got a result, and they used that as fuel and just showed what they're capable of. And look, they can, get ready now for intermediate football next year. Like, I know, Claire, you've played them in the past. They're a very strong team on their day. They're a proud team down there. They've done Trojan work for the ladies' game, and no doubt it was a fantastic result for them at the weekend, just to preserve their status for another year.
Oh my goodness, like, talk about, draining. Imagine playing that game, like, because psychologically very draining and then physically too. But Offaly, I'll be honest, because Wicklow have, been so good at maintaining their status, you kind of were thinking, probably a Wicklow win, but my goodness, did Offaly make them work for it. And I suppose that's what you want from a relegation game. You don't want any team winning comfortably. You want it to mean a lot to both teams, and that was so clear at the weekend that it meant so much to both. And got to the stage where you're thinking, someone has to lose here, and I don't want it to be anybody. But yeah, huge relief for Wicklow, but they're good at that. And it takes, like I said, I suppose psychologically, it takes a lot of strength to stay in games like that and to ultimately come out on top. So they're very skilled at that. And yeah, that to bring it to extra time, you're thinking, what are they going to do here with this tree? And you couldn't have. Well, we do in sport, I suppose, but you're thinking, no, this isn't possible, and sure enough, it was. But no, Offaly, I think, as I say, it was clear how much it meant to both teams, and that's all you can ask of any two teams going out to play a relegation game.
I suppose just not the year that Offaly wanted, coming off the league, they wanted to deliver in the championship, but just not going their way. Maybe just a bit of a turnover of players this year, and they're now going to go down to the junior grade next year. Like that's going to make the junior ranks even more competitive next year when you add a team like Offaly into the mix. But Wicklow last year were put into a relegation playoff having lost to Offaly, and 12 months later they're the team that now relegates Offaly down into the junior grade. But what a performance, and just anything is possible. Like, you think, oh look, you're 3 points down, the clock is in the 60 and it's ticking more. They're thinking, well, when's the final whistle going to sound here? Have Offaly done enough? They go for the chance after chance. Offaly managed to just derail everything that they throw at them, and then just one long ball floated in, and you just get the hand of God and put it into the back of the net, and you're looking at extra time. But what a performance by Wicklow, winning, of course, 3-11 to 3-8 the last day. So that concludes episode number 5. Of course, we have frantic battles from the senior championship and the intermediate playoff, of course. What a weekend of ladies football we had last week. Now this week, of course, it's all on the line. We have the intermediate semi-finals, we have the junior semi-finals, and of course a senior relegation playoff down for decision, and it's going to be even more frantic. We do have a second episode arriving this week as well. We will be looking at those games in depth in terms of those semi-finals in both the intermediate and the junior grade, and talking to a player from each of the 8 respective camps that are looking to stake their claim for an August date in Croke Park. But this is episode 5 concluding, and if it's anything to go by, with 5 episodes and every single week, it's just getting even more and more competitive. But now we're at the business end of the season, so delighted that the girls joined us once again, and hopefully Clare will be here next week flying the flag for Leitrim as they hope to reclaim their senior status for another 12 months at the minimum. But we thank each and every one of you for listening every single week, and we hope you enjoyed episode number 5. And of course, we have episode number 6 that will be dropping on Thursday evening as well, looking ahead to the weekend's action. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch you for episode number 6, and we'll see you again next week.